Hello, everyone, and welcome in. Thank you for joining us for today's session, Turning Knowledge into Real Enterprise Value. My name is David Flach. I'm Senior Marketing Manager here at Bloomfire, and I'll be moderating today's conversation. I'm excited to dig into how high-performing organizations aren't just managing knowledge, but activating it to drive real business outcomes, reduce operational friction, and even impress the hard-to-impress CFO. Before we really get into the conversation, just a little bit of housekeeping. We will try to leave some time at the end for Q&A, so please feel free to submit questions anytime throughout the conversation in the module right below my video here. And then we also have a few downloads available in the download section, which you'll see underneath the slides. We do have the complete slides available for you to download, as well as the full report on enterprise intelligence, on the value of enterprise intelligence. So please feel free to grab those if you so choose. And then for anyone who attended our last webinar, it was Enterprise Intelligence with our CEO, Philip Rattan. It was last month. Today is kind of like the sequel. That session was all about why companies need to treat knowledge as an enterprise asset. And today, it's more about the how. What does it actually look like in practice, and how do you quantify its impact? So with me to lead that discussion are two of Bloomfire's best minds. We have Dan Stradtman, our Chief Marketing Officer. Dan has spent much of his career successfully leading research and insights teams at Fortune 500 companies, and now helps organizations of various sizes across industries activate their own knowledge to help reduce friction and foster innovation through Bloomfire Knowledge Management Platform. And also Brian Zander, who is our VP of Marketing. Brian's an expert in building high-performing teams. Brian actually led the 6-month customer research initiative using statistical analysis and other methods to uncover how top organizations turn knowledge into enterprise value, and the hard dollar impact that knowledge flow has on a business when harnessed effectively. So let's dive in. Dan, let's start a foundation. When we talk about translating knowledge into a hard dollar value, where does that journey begin? What are we really trying to impact?
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks as always for hosting. Thanks everyone for joining. You know, this is something I've been kind of chasing my whole career at different stops. And so, you know, no matter where I was at, it really came down to understanding that enterprise value, right? And so, you know, companies and especially the executives who are leading them usually care deeply about growth. That could be growth in revenue, growth in earnings, you know, growth in innovation, or growth in market share. And, you know, these drivers are collectively shaping the overall enterprise value for that firm. And it becomes this holistic measure of your company's work, not just today, but also, you know, as you go forward, so you can track it over time. You know, let's be honest, 2025 probably hasn't been the most stable year, right? We're kind of all navigating certain levels of uncertainty. There's been budget freezes, headcount limits, shifting markets. And in this environment, it just has felt, you know, almost harder than ever to really generate that high impact growth, given the limitations on adding new resources or taking on additional risk. And that's really the trick here. And hopefully over the next minutes you spend with us, we can go a little bit deeper into this and give you some actionable insights to carry forward in your own organizations, right? There's so much knowledge baked into an organization that when you run into these downturns, this uncertainty, the new tends to stop, right? And so how well a company can tap into kind of what it already knows and reduce that friction to gaining access to that knowledge and then turn it into action really does matter. And that's why knowledge is so important. When you can unlock that full value of what your teams already know, when you improve the access to that, when you reduce the duplication, you speed up and empower better decisions, you start to create more leverage, even in times of uncertainty, right? And so now you can increase your enterprise value without necessarily hiring more people or without necessarily adding this massive investment and without adding operational complexity. So it's not just about reducing cost. You're unlocking this dormant capacity and capability, and that becomes a strategic advantage.
Yeah, yeah, and identifying and building a new competitive or strategic advantage for your company. That's a pretty great thing to have on a resume. Brian, let's go over to you. So, where exactly does that untapped value live? Is there a pattern that you've noticed across the companies that you've worked with?
Yeah, there definitely is a pattern. We surveyed over 100 companies. There were more than 10,000 professionals that responded overall to the results. And one of the things that was really actually surprising was how consistent the results were across multiple industries and use cases. At Bloomfire, we have customers from all kinds of industries, everything from finance to manufacturing, consumer goods, media and internet companies, all kinds of things like that. And they use Bloomfire in different ways. But what was really, really consistent was this value, or the places where they found value, were pretty similar across all of those different areas. This actually allows us to pinpoint where the value lives. And it's not just in one department. It's not hiding in one place. There's no magic silver bullet. I'm sorry for anybody who's listening who's looking for that silver bullet. It's really about the knowledge that flows across the organization. And we can actually look at all of the different areas that we uncovered in the data. So one of the areas that we discovered was in daily inefficiencies. And when you think about knowledge management platforms, this is the metrics that people most often hear about. It's things like wasted search time, duplicating efforts, recreating content, things along those lines. Another area that we often talk about with our customers is time to proficiency and onboarding. This is one of those areas where you have someone moving from one part of the organization to another, or perhaps new employees coming in and they have long onboarding times. It takes 3, 6, even 9 months in some cases in order for someone to come up to speed. This then reduces their ability to make decisions and produces potentially knowledge gaps, especially if you're in an industry where there's a high amount of turnover. But what's interesting as we move forward is the employee engagement, faster decision making. These are some of the cultural benefits of knowledge sharing. That's really where a lot of the value unlocks. And we'll go through some examples a little bit later today in our conversation about that. But this addresses some of the hidden costs of employee disengagement, misalignment, slow collaboration, things along those lines. We also have some key value that can be tied to customer-facing roles. So think about this like your customer success or customer service areas. Every time that those people are spent looking for information is an opportunity missed where you could be delivering value. You can also look at commercial strategy and execution, kind of that commercial leadership or commercial excellence. This is where knowledge fuels better strategy, product development decisions, revenue execution, and areas along those lines. So as you look kind of at the size of the bars on this chart, the biggest area of impact that you're going to see is in employee engagement, alignment, and better collaboration. Employees feel more empowered are going to make decisions. And the data shows that they do feel more empowered when they have better access to information. They also claim that they are going to be more productive when they have better access to information. So there's some really, really great insights across our data set that show that the key to unlocking tremendous enterprise value comes from breaking down some of those barriers and giving people access to the information that they need in order to do their jobs well.
Yeah, and maybe just to build off what Brian was saying, is for a lot of the companies that come to Bloomfire, I'm sure there's some on this webinar of our valued customer base that would feel this way. What they're really looking for is a solution to that universal pain point of like, hey, it's almost impossible for me or for my team or department or enterprise to find what they need to do their job successfully. And that's kind of where that starting point is. What tends to happen sometimes is, when you try to get the executives to buy in, it's tough sometimes to build that business case around what is the strategic value of the solution. And so, it ends up being, well, it's time savings or those types of things. And that's certainly part of it. Don't get me wrong, but there's a productivity gain, and then there's these hidden costs of, Brian was referring to around disengagement of employees, misalignment, and that slower collaboration.
Yeah, tying into that strategic value that you mentioned, Dan, like that's absolutely essential. I've led several projects for big multinational companies, and there were two main things at that company that really slowed down the progress of work. One of that was what we referred to as tribal knowledge, right? It's that tacit knowledge. It's knowing the right people, getting them involved, bringing them along, and helping them understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And then the second one was internal inertia. It just takes a long time when you're dealing with a large organization to implement change. And even if you're just trying to shift things like 1 or 2 degrees, that can be a phenomenal level of effort that's required. Progress at that company was measured in years, not in months or in weeks. It was the exact opposite of being nimble, agile, responsive to markets, and that kind of thing. And so daily inefficiencies in that case are a symptom of the problem, but it's really that the untapped value, the real strategic value that the executives are going to care about, it's in those cultural and operational impacts, which were much, much larger, but much harder to basically affect. It needs to be something that is big enough to matter to those executives too. Like that's a part of building that business case. I think if you're not able to tap into something that is, substantive to the way that that company operates, then you're going to have a really hard time getting investment in improving your knowledge program, improving the areas of enterprise intelligence that we've been talking about.
So what I'm hearing both of you say, I think, is that enterprise value, it's not necessarily just about revenue growth. Dan, and maybe you can clarify this. It's kind of about unlocking that latent capacity inside the business.
Yeah, exactly, David. I mean, there's, I think the quickest path we always tend to see is all right, well, here's the time, we're going to end up saving. But, that doesn't resonate typically as much in the C-suite, especially in the CFO's chair. And so, then you go to, all right, well, what's the impact on revenue? And so you can start to do those, but it can be any number of things that, once you can measure and put a dollar value around, that becomes part of the overall story. So that can be, again, like we've briefly talked about, the higher engagement and retention of employees. It could be making faster decisions more confidently, right? So I'm de-risking an organization. It can be, having a greater cross-functional alignment, so you're reducing just organizational friction. You could have, stronger innovation outcomes that lead, to being able to bring things to market faster, taking leadership positions in a market, or, again, coming back to, the overall capacity of the team. I don't need necessarily to hire 10 extra people, I may need 5. And so you've got a capacity gain there.
Yeah. I mean, Dan, most of what you just mentioned has been talked about forever, as far as business challenges go. Brian, in the research that you compiled, like, are you saying you have a concrete way to measure kind of these challenges and have an outcome there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got some specific examples that I'm share. One of the things that's really incredible is that there's real opportunities to address these and make these improvements. A lot of companies traditionally have written this off as the cost of doing business. They miss out on opportunities to increase their productivity per employee, to see faster attainment of objectives. and ultimately deliver the kind of results that your C-suite, your board, your shareholders can really get behind and get excited about. We're talking about things like earnings per share. We're talking about things like revenue per employee, things that really, really matter on that strategic level. Dan mentioned capacity and increasing the capacity of the teams. And we've got one really quick example that maybe we can start out with here. And so this is from one of the largest US-based insurers. In the survey, they had 15,000 agents participating. In customer service, when you're thinking about customer service, managing time is essential to understanding the cost to serve. And this is one of those cases where the daily inefficiencies can actually have a significant impact. So in their case, cutting search times and reducing duplicated efforts among this team saved 6.5 hours per employee per week. A big part of that was eliminating the need for them to ask peers for guidance because the questions were already asked and answered within Bloomfire. And so when you stretch that 6.5 hours per employee per week across the entire department, it's basically the equivalent of adding 1,867 full-time employees. So addressing this issue effectively increases the capacity of their service team by 12.5%, all without having to hire a single extra person. But what's interesting about this company was they realized that this pain point of not being able to easily access information to do their job wasn't just an issue with their agents. It's actually an organizational-wide problem, which we're now working with them to address.
So what I'm hearing is that the potential for enterprise value is really much higher than just increasing the capacity for the team. There really is other major revenue driving impacts as well. And when we talk about the enterprise value, the impacts are measured really in the millions. But not necessarily just about dollars. We're also talking about creating an organization that can think faster and act faster and then ultimately win faster. Dan, I know that a lot of teams measure effectiveness by time. I know we've kind of alluded to this, but moving beyond time as a measurement of productivity and effectiveness, how do you get past that?
Yeah, it's a good question. That time is universal, right? And it's one of those things I think we all can kind of appreciate and understand readily, but it tends to diminish in some ways as you try to make your story higher up into the organization. And so I can tell you, early in my career, I had no idea how to really understand that difference between time and value. And I often would tie my own value at a company, and I'm sure others have as well, to output. And that could be the quantity of output. I've done this many things, right? Or the quality of output. I've done these things well. And what you're really doing is producing without a ton of thought into how that then carries through an organization into revenue, into dollars, or into the the metrics that drive a successful business. And so then I ended up going into a role that had more focus on client service, and it had a bit of a consulting aspect. So you're tracking your time, right? But you're also starting to see that connection between the time you're putting in and the effort you're putting in and your overall efficiency as a worker in terms of maybe an overall project's profitability and revenue. So when you can kind of make that math work, you go, well, wait a minute, I'm doing this much time on this project. Here's how that's equating to the revenue of this project. And this becomes a very straightforward way to understand the value per an employee on a team. And ultimately, that's the way that we're going to look at a lot of these things, right? Is to say, what value does that role, does that person, does that department have on the overall value to the organization? And so you start to be able to understand these revenue per employee type metrics, right? And then as I moved into leadership positions at bigger brands, I was being asked to say, all right, well, what is your team's value? And how do we make that investment criteria on what to do? And so you take that same mentality, you apply it to corporate marketing teams or insights teams or whatever the case may be. And, albeit I might have been looking at it in some cases on a smaller scale, meaning my team is working on X and here's the revenue streams that are coming out of that, and tying that back to the knowledge we create and the programs we would run. Most companies, though, do have a relatively clear understanding of this metric, which is revenue per employee, right? Either at a very high level, knowing, hey, we sell this much stuff, here's how many employees we have, or getting into the individual roles and responsibilities on teams so that you can get a nuance of that. And that becomes, I think, a really great alternative to only tracking kind of productivity and time, is that revenue per employee metric.
Yeah, Dan, I completely agree. I think about when you and I first started talking about revenue per employee a couple of years ago, and we were looking at different departments and saying, well, this department contributes a little bit more revenue than another department, but they still are determining like what is the right size of their organization by how much revenue that they can impact. This is why, for me, revenue per employee is probably my favorite metric. For a lot of companies like the ones that you're describing, it can be the gold standard that you use when you want to connect your knowledge sharing strategy to financial performance. Let's take innovation, for example. It's not just about getting new ideas. It's also about how quickly those ideas come to market. The longer that it takes teams to build and share the foundational research and then get buy-in or approvals that they need, the slower that in turn you're going to ship your product. When knowledge is able to flow freely across the organization, your innovation velocity increases. Dan spent a lot of his career working in the consumer goods industry. He knows how incredibly high the pressure can be as you are trying to push new products out. And in many cases, being in that first to market position, it can be incredibly valuable. I was recently at a conference for the toy industry, and I just by happenstance met some product managers from a large toy and play company. They happened to also be Bloomfire clients. So we got to talking a little bit about how they use Bloomfire as their kind of research library for all of these insights into consumer behavior, and then how the product managers then use that to help them rapidly understand what's changing in the market. And if you're familiar with the toy industry, this year has been massively disrupted by some of the geopolitical things that have been going on, and so people who are developing the products, they're often not the same people doing the research, but they benefit greatly from having that research available to them at the time of need. And so I talked to them a little bit about innovation and cycle design time and things like that, and having their Bloomfire community available to helping them. Not everyone on their team saw some immediate impacts to innovation or to design cycle time, but those who did, they saw 29% improvement in cycle design time and a 23% improvement in their projects. So we can actually model this out using that revenue per employee metric for this particular group. And that can give us a strong financial understanding of what is the enterprise value in the terms of improvements in innovation or improvements in cycle time that's happening as a result of improved knowledge flow. So in this example, there are 675 people at this company that are involved in some way, shape, or form in either product development or product release, design, that kind of thing. The revenue per employee for this company is $782,000. So about somewhere between 5 and 6% of them reported that they saw improvements in both cycle time and innovation. And then the math becomes very straightforward. You take that $782,000, you say 5% of the people saw the improvements. There was a 23% improvement in magnitude. I'm talking about innovation here. Times that by 675 employees, you get somewhere around $6 million. On the product cycle design time, you do the same thing. You take that 782,000, multiply that by the 6% of the people who saw it, the 29% improvement, 675 people, you get about $9 million or total $15 million impact. So you see that that's basically a 2.9% lift in the productivity for this particular group of 765 employees. Now that's 700 or 675 employees out of, I think, somewhere around 2,400 employees total across the company. So you can see that it doesn't take a major lift in productivity if you're influencing the right team or in the right area to produce a big impact. Like $15 million is a pretty big impact for this particular company, but this is really only looking at those people who said that they saw improvements in innovation or in product cycle design time, and then the impact that it's having on their personal ability to be productive and to increase the revenue that they're producing as an individual employee. So, it really shows the strategic value and the impact of giving teams the information that they need to be successful in doing the things that they're doing that are going to contribute to that bottom line revenue at the end of the day.
Yeah, I like that example because it really shows the momentum, and almost like that snowball effect that a small change can have a really large impact across the organization. Dan, I want to ask if you have an example of kind of where friction, where work seems to slow down or can be disruptive.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all can kind of appreciate the fact that when you change jobs, move into a new role, come into a new department, that is extraordinarily disruptive, not only for you as the employee, but also, for the teams in the company. And so, most companies want, senior leaders to have a deep understanding of all aspects of the business. Sometimes it takes time to learn that, right? And so, anybody who moves across an organization, whether you're senior or junior, is going to have essentially an on-ramp time. And then, as we looked at our survey data coming back again across this wide swath of folks, they pointed to onboarding, right? And that onboarding can be, new employee into an org, it can be across an org. Most companies wrap up that kind of formal onboarding in 30, maybe 60 days. I'm sure there are others who have a longer tail, but the reality is full proficiency in a role can take 6 months or more. I often tell, especially folks who are entering orgs I've worked for, in early mid-career, like you're going to feel like you're not very good at your job. Probably for a bit of time, and then it's going to really pick up, a few months in, and that's, I think, typically been the case. What we saw from the data, though, was that if you have a really strong knowledge management program system, that ramp time was cut nearly a third, about right around 30%. And so, and then companies that were really good at knowledge management, had a good platform, or were using ours at the time, or just had a better process, would be cutting it even higher, up to 50%. So yeah, I mean, the onboarding side of it, you can't deny that that's an area where access to knowledge, decreasing friction to be able to come up to speed and get proficiency faster is a key input.
Yeah, and if you want to actually measure that number, that Dan's talking about, kind of that ramp time, so to speak, we've actually developed a model to help kind of account for it. And we break things down basically into two key components. So there's the operational cost. Think about this as the time that you're spending learning the new job. This is the hourly salary that you're costing the company, where you're learning rather than contributing. And in our model, this number decreases every week. Obviously, as you get to know your job a little bit better, you're spending less time learning some of those nuances that Dan mentioned. And then you're more able to contribute to the value that you're due to produce. And then the other side of that is the productivity impact. So if you think about like how much revenue you're contributing when you reach that peak productivity space, so you're in the role, what you're doing, you have access to all the information you need, and I'm now producing at the top possible level. Well, there is that period of time while you're in that learning where you're not able to produce at that level. Like Dan said, you're not you're not feeling like you're really great at your job during this period. And if we can shrink that down, then we can also shrink the amount of time that the company is losing revenue as people are moving around in the organization. So, for example, if you could take that ramp time, that time to feel fully proficiently, from 21 weeks down to 8, and we have many examples in the data in our survey, as well as anecdotal examples that we hear from our customers where this is possible, you can see how these costs break down over time. So on the left-hand side, we have that operational cost. This is based on weekly salary, and you can see in each one of those boxes that the time progresses. As time progresses, that it goes down. And then on the right, we have the productivity gap. This is the measure of revenue per employee that's lost compared to a fully trained employee. And it's really possible to recover 59% of both the costs and lost productivity by improving access to information during this important transitionary period. This is not just a nice to have thing. This could be a really powerful multiplier of your workforce efficiency. It's about building the culture where people aren't fumbling through and guessing and then making avoidable mistakes while they're learning, but they're actually up to speed and contributing right from the get-go.
Yeah, that's great. And, thank you both for kind of laying the groundwork that knowledge, it doesn't just support business outcomes. And I know I said this before, but it's really about unlocking that momentum across the workforce. I do want to pivot slightly. Dan, you talked earlier about innovation and onboarding when people are changing roles. But what about the rest of the organization? What kind of happens outside of those higher visibility moments? The employees that aren't changing jobs or leading innovation projects. What happens there?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of other places where, having that access to knowledge is going to be an improvement to the overall experience, right? And so, I think I can certainly appreciate it, as I've, gotten higher up in organizations, large organizations, it's, I've seen this behavior. I will say that I probably had this behavior when I didn't have Bloomfire, which was just, I'd ping somebody and be like, I need the answer to this, right? Or I need that. And, the reality is that for many of us, like, we don't have that luxury, like, we need to go find it. And so when people can't find the information they need to accomplish a task or to fit that need, you really lose momentum. If you think about, you're turning along, it just kind of becomes this roadblock and it kind of dies on you. And so, you're not really, you can look at it and go, well, I lost an hour here searching for this, or I lost a few extra clicks here, but you're really losing kind of that velocity, alignment, and the compound gains that come from, being able to move with certainty and have, informed actions from knowledge. And so, again, when you have engaged employees, right, they're engaged, they feel good about the tools they have the information they need to do their job, they tend to move faster, they need to think bigger, they need to, they tend to build just better. And, that's empowering for an employee. And so you end up, again, kind of that compound effect. You have less turnover, maybe you have stronger onboarding processes, and you have, more discretionary effort at every level. There's a reality to this, is that sometimes, you look at it and you go, well, if you're able to quantify these things, how, where can I spend that money instead? And certainly there are cases where you can make that trade-off, where you say, all right, I'm going to choose to spend money on a knowledge management system or on a program, and that means I don't spend over here, and ultimately I can spend less on this and get more out of that. And that's a very straight line to how to kind of find that money. But some of this is just compound interest building on itself, right? And so, yeah, it may not be, we can quantify this information, we can put it in terms of dollars, and in some cases millions of dollars, but it's the compound effect of having a better, more operationally efficient, more sound organization with empowered employees. And that becomes, a bellwether for your company. And, Brian will go into more details. Knowledge engagement isn't and shouldn't be a side effect of it, right? It becomes a strategy to say we're going to make sure we have the most informed employees that can make these decisions. In high performing organizations, like in the same way, knowledge management, can't be a background system. It has to be, the nervous system of how people learn, how they adapt, and how they drive outcomes. And if we want teams to execute with precision and purpose, the knowledge has to be designed to do that as well. It can't just sit still. It's got to move, it's got to connect, and it's got to elevate everyone it touches.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Brian, I mean, Dan mentioned it. I know you've worked with some teams that have been really effective at measuring this. What patterns have you seen there?
Yeah. One of the clearest signals that we see is the connection between employee engagement and then their eventual output. So, one of the questions that you might get, and kind of Dan alluded to this a little bit in terms of like, you're producing this additional revenue or you're producing this additional impact or enterprise value, where am I seeing that in my balance sheet, right? And you see it in lifts in that number of revenue per employee. You see it in places like teams that have the capacity to do more with the same number of people or even less people, as maybe teams reduce sizes because of attrition, but they're still able to put out the same level of output. What's interesting is as you get into some of those areas, sometimes employees can get really excited about that challenge. Other times they can be discouraged, but the trend is really the same, which is, 46% of employees say that their productivity significantly improves as a result of better access to information and the resulting improvements in employee engagement. This is unequivocal. I think somewhere around 80% of employees, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, say that there's some level of productivity improvement, but 46% saying it significantly improves. These are employees that are not just working harder, they're working smarter. They're able to get more done in a day. They share ideas with their fellow employees. They leverage existing knowledge, but sometimes they're also revising it and making it better. They make the company function faster, making more confident decisions. And we can actually quantify all of that with some of the data that we pulled out of the survey. So, here's an example of how we can do that. So if an employee is engaged and aligned and has access to trusted knowledge, they reach those decisions faster, they make fewer errors, and they contribute more meaningfully to their results. And one of the best examples that I've seen is actually with this regional bank based in New York State that we work with. They did a webinar with us last year if you want to go back and listen to some of the things that they do. This institution relies really heavily on personalized service, on operational efficiency, and trust to deliver value to its members. And Bloomfire is enabling these employees to access and share critical knowledge in real time, and it fosters this culture of knowledge sharing and collaboration and engagement, and it equips them with the tools that they need in order to deliver exceptional service. And for them, they will tell you the impact of adding Bloomfire to their organization was immediate. Within the first 90 days of launching their first community, they had over 12,000 views across about 1,200 contributions. Engagement included their frontline workers all the way up to people from the C-suite. They had that buy-in across the entire organization. And so for them, using some of the information that they shared with us, we calculated the revenue impact in this rise of engagement at over $41 million, or an impact of revenue per employee of $48,000 per employee. And this is how we calculated that. So the first thing is 96% of their employees agree that knowledge sharing makes them more productive, and that they would prefer to work in an organization where employees have encouraged or employees have and are encouraged to share their knowledge. We also scored their level of engagement as a 4 out of 5. And this is based on a series of questions related to how they feel when they could find information that they needed versus when they couldn't, how that impacted their decision making and productivity, and what the cultural benefits of knowledge sharing and engagement and empowerment were at their organization. And what's critical here is that 77% of their employees felt like their productivity was either improved or significantly improved by the change. That is a massive impact. So if we come back to our revenue per employee number for this organization at $411,000, factor in all of those improvements that have an impact on their productivity, we see that their revenue per employee goes up by $48,000 from before and after. We're also seeing a really strong correlation between knowledge access and achieving their objectives and their key results. It's true that when knowledge flows more freely, teams are more likely to hit those corporate objectives. It's not just about having people that are working hard. It's about people that have really, really a smart direction to move towards, that are engaged and that are working and happy with everything that's going on at the company.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned OKRs, Brian. Almost every company that we partner with, they use some sort of goal setting framework. Dan, can you unpack that correlation a little bit, that correlation between knowledge access and OKRs?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be brief. I'll let Brian kind of take it, but that has to make sense, right? If you have good OKRs, they tend to be strategic, they're measurable, they're kind of a clear view of what success should look like for the company, and so they become kind of the cliff notes or the guide, if you would, on how I as an employee can then be successful. And so even at companies, though, with strong goal frameworks, there's usually always a performance gap. And top performers hit their marks and others may fall short. And, the reasons why are varied, and I think we can get at, at least a couple of those reasons if we think about how knowledge conveys through an organization. And I don't know, Brian, you probably want to build off that, though.
Yeah, it's not just about the effort that people are going through. It's related to the access that they have to that information. When teams have really, really great visibility into what other people are working on, or the opposite, where they can't find the resources that support their objectives, then you have this opportunity where alignment can either be really, really positive, or it might start to break down. And so if you're going through a process of trying to say, hey, I'm working on my enterprise intelligence program, or I'm working on my knowledge management piece, and I'm saying, okay, where are we going to have this impact? Look at your OKRs as a place to start. What are those key results that the executives are looking for? What are the factors, the cultural and operational benefits that we were talking about before? And how does it support those objectives? And then we can go through and start looking and measuring that. And that comes to, asking the right questions, understanding the impact that we have on things like engagement, like we already talked about, or innovation, or on any of those areas. And our data shows that even in high functioning organizations, a lack of access is one of the top reasons why teams miss their goals. And so if you can break down those barriers to knowledge, there is almost a direct correlation to the ability or improvement that they have in their ability to meet or exceed their goals. We asked that question specifically in the survey: have my team met or achieved the goals this year? And for the people who answered positively, every single one of them were doing things to break down barriers of access of information, addressing content gaps, looking at how their searches were being done, what people are looking for. And then this ultimately leads to that higher level of attainment, engagement, and ultimately the value that your knowledge program is producing.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Dan, some of those strategic objectives that a company might set out to do that can feel overwhelming. How can the audience make it manageable to kind of set out on this journey within their organization?
Yeah, it can be a tough first step, David. Everything we've talked about: engagement, productivity, OKR, speed to decision, I feel like it ladders up, to this bigger idea. We as a company, we've talked about kind of this evolution into enterprise intelligence, but enterprise intelligence really isn't just a departmental fix, right? It becomes this enterprise advantage. A big idea should feel ambitious. Like, that's kind of why it's a big idea, but it doesn't need to feel unmanageable. And so, the key, I think, is to resist that, man, I'm trying to boil the ocean, and instead ask, well, where is knowledge, access, friction, unavailability, rot, costing us the most today? And that then allows you to kind of know where to start. And as we've talked about enterprise intelligence, it's really not a theory. It can become this multiplier, because when knowledge can flow freely between departments, between divisions or employees themselves, like, you're not just fixing like a single isolated issue. You start to create that velocity, start to reduce duplication, you shorten the distance between, hey, I have this insight and then I put it into action, right? And that's where you start to see some of these performance improvements, and you start to see it scale across an organization. So even though you may start small, you're creating this opportunity to scale. So, start smart, right? You're gonna, it's not gonna necessarily be the whole enterprise to start. It might be, but like, if it feels overwhelming, find those areas where there's the most friction, or where there's the most to gain from reducing it. Where is there slow access to knowledge that's dragging down an outcome? Hey, we have look at the symptoms. We have slower product launches. We have our onboarding doesn't feel natural. It feels either bloated or too slim. Service teams are flying blind, right? Sales ends up chasing ghosts. That's where you start to find it, and then that becomes your wedge. And so once you solve that, the momentum begins. The momentum earns trust. The trust will then earn that investment, right? And especially if you're tying it to dollarization value, and before you know it, you're not just solving an individual problem, you're really going through this digital transformation about how your organization can think and move. And without sounding too salesy about it, right? Like, that's where we feel like we help, or we can help. We've walked this path with other companies, and we're doing it more each day with new folks, and we can help you figure out where that knowledge friction is holding you back, and then help you solve it, and ideally get that momentum behind you.
Yeah, I want to build on what you're saying, Dan, about like just one more thing too, which is, and when you're building this case, whether it's like internally or with your executive team, you want to think about knowledge and the value that knowledge is bringing. It's an asset for your organization. And like any other asset, if you neglect it, it's going to depreciate over time. It's knowledge management is not a tool. It's not a system. It's not some initiative. It's part of the core of what drives your enterprise value. And there are lots of things that can negatively impact enterprise value that's not related to your knowledge program. Like, for example, you could have a big, inciting event that happens outside your organization. Outside forces come in and change conditions in your market. But how you weather those well is a direct result of how you're managing the asset of the knowledge that's in your people, and things like their engagement, their ability to work together, their collaboration. So when you have those hard times, having strong knowledge assets is how you weather it, and the impact of those hard times is reduced. And when you have good times, it's usually as a result of things going in your favor, but you also having this really, really powerful engine that goes across your entire organization moving forward. So, like, thinking about your knowledge as an asset, in addition to, choosing STOMART and, having this multiplier across your organization, it can really have a lot of value. And I think the thing is, like, it's a different mindset. If you're not quantifying the value of the knowledge that your people have, then you're probably undervaluing your people.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate the insights there. We have just a couple minutes left. I do want to get to some of the questions that have come in. I'll start with this one. I'll set it up by saying, I mentioned at the top, you all have both worked at some really, at a lot of organizations with a really impressive background. The question that came in is, what is the example of an aha moment that you've seen when a company finally unlocked the value of kind of what they already knew?
Yeah, I mean, I can, let me start off, and then I'll kick it over to Brian. We'll go back. We'll go kind of back rewind to my Walmart days, right? And so, I'm not saying it necessarily turned into some big momentum that we were able to push kind of knowledge management, but it certainly was an aha moment that mirrored, I think, the market situation we're in of, kind of coming out of, what was, I think, termed the Great Recession in 2008. I mean, we were resource constrained, right? And so, we were trying to find ways to message into the market around, the value prop that Walmart has. And there was a lot of advertising being done that was starting to push into a way that was more maybe discount focused, we'll call it, rollbacks or the tool. And we hadn't done a lot of new research, in part because we had some cutbacks and constraints. And so there was actually research that I had done maybe a year earlier that really got at the heart of the matter and talked about kind of the core of Walmart, the core customers, and kind of what messages resonate. And I remember, had I not been there, I'm not sure it would have gotten found, right? Because there wasn't that system in place. But, having connection to kind of work that had been done and the value of knowledge that might have been buried otherwise, was able to take that and really restructure a little bit of the strategy around, hey, maybe we move away from some of the items that are more kind of chasing our competition when it comes to like savings, if you would, like coupons and price reduction, and more get back to the core of what would be considered, I think, that brand, which is everyday low price. And so that started off a whole initiative that then did lead to more investment and did lead to kind of a big strategy shift. But it was really based on a small bit of research and insight that we had done prior that might have gotten lost had there not been some good connectivity between, the people who had done it and kind of the current situation. So, like, those are the types of things that are hard to, hard, I think, sometimes for the C-suite to see, right? But, in terms of like, you're spending money on a program or something like this to manage knowledge. But when you don't do those things have more of a chance of being missed, and you end up spending, millions on a program that may not work for messaging, or you end up, completely missing the mark with your customer. And then, the compounding effects of those are massive compared to the small investment you might make in upping the level of intelligence for your enterprise. Now, Brian, you have a couple thoughts from your history?
No, well, I love hearing your stories from the Walmart days, because I think it's always something small that turned into something just massive for that. Like, the multiplier effect of the size of that organization is cool. My example is from a much smaller company, but I think it's a really interesting point. It's right when I was fairly early in my career, we were running retail stores in the nutraceutical space, like health food and that kind of stuff. And we kept getting all of these people that would come in, customers would come into the stores, and they would ask the tellers information about the products. And like, getting product knowledge was really, really important. But more important than even just like knowing what the label said about what was on the product was like fundamentals of like healthy living and like being active and all of those kinds of things. And so we actually had a couple of employees that were frontline workers that were all in medical school. And how they were in medical school and holding down a job, I still don't understand, because I know how like insane that is. And because they were in medical school and they were, doing what they were doing, they had this great knowledge in their minds about health and healthy living.
And so they actually contributed by giving training to other employees and passing this, what I would now call tacit knowledge from what they knew to these other employees. And we set up these training programs. They actually wrote a training book. I could have gone out and probably hired someone to put this training program together and put it together. But by tapping into the knowledge that already existed in the organization, not only did we save all of that cost, it also was received a lot better because it was coming from their peers. And so you might not know all of the things that are in the heads of every single one of your employees. So setting up this environment where it's like an opportunity to share and contribute and have new ideas and be like, hey, this is part of my life that's not necessarily my professional life, but is a big part of who I am, that can tie in and unlock all kinds of new ideas and new things for companies as well.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Good example, and Dan, thank you as well for your example. Okay, I'm gonna stop us there. I know we're just a few minutes short of the top of the hour. Want to respect everybody's time. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dan, Brian. Thank you for all of the insights, and thank you for everybody who joined for being a part of the conversation. I hope that you feel like you have tangible ways to think about activating your knowledge as a true driver for your enterprise value. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. And before I forget, you will get a recording of this so you can reference it later. That'll be coming out to you in just a couple hours. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.